Greetings! Ouch! Guten Tag, Talo Falava. Yes. What time is it? Good afternoon. Especially again to my Snow Gang Club. Snow Sheep, Snow Shepherds. That's right, this is Dr. Snow Brown. Now I am ready. I, Dr. Snow Brown, being the meek sovereign king of Crystal Kingdom Church TV Limited. Crystal Kingdom, a nation that is meek, that was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's correct. And established on a social media platform, a private Facebook, on the 11th of January 2018. Hereby, I wish to command as the sovereign king, as a meek sovereign king, of a new baby brown monarch, of a new monarch born in Aotearoa, New Zealand. A new royal family born in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And of course, this meek sovereign king originally was born in an independent South Pacific nation called Samoa, Western Samoa, on the 28th of September 1972. Born a Treviranus, not a Patu, but a Treviranus. That's correct. But of course, Patu is part of my DNA. That's correct. And the Patu family in Samoa, a noble family, a family that has a long line of kings. That's correct. And I mean, in their royal bloodline, they have a long history, a long line of kings. So, do you understand now why I've got a guardian angel? And his name is Samalama. That's correct. It's because of that reason. The Batu side of the family, that's correct, have always had a monarch. I've always had a meek monarch or a monarch of some sort. Because they are a private royal family, like the four kings of Samoa, like the head of state, Mandiatoa Tanumafili II, that's correct. And Tupuata Masese Lealofi III, that's correct. Did you gun down by one of your so-called racist, arrogant, son of a bitch, white nigger, police officer. That's correct. New Zealand police officer. Right. So there's the history during the Mau movement. Right? So that's right. So I don't speak this way because I'm trying to be a royal, a full royal, or trying to be a sovereign king. One that is meek. I am not trying to impersonate an identity, of nobility status, of royal status, with this kind of voice, unless I've got the backing built in my DNA, in my bloodline, in my heritage. That's correct. The Batu family have got a private monarch, but of course, they don't want to say that because when they heard about the bestiality sin, that's great, that happened a long time ago. They all suddenly wanted to, rule you out. Well, I'm sorry, you can't rule out somebody who is prophesied in the Bible, the book of Revelation, to be the king that rides a creature. But it's not a creature, it's a metaphor. I'm not at liberty to tell any of you what it means. That's correct. With the 10 crowns, you're looking at it. Now watch it now and be careful. And listen very, very carefully. That's correct. And don't all look at me as I'm Colonel Gaddafi, or I'm Saddam Hussein, or I'm Osama bin Laden, or that I could be another kind of terrorist or dictator. The God of Hitler. That's correct. So I don't speak like this unless I'm a full royal, or unless I really am a sovereign king. One day is meek with a kingdom. Listen up now. You tails, That's right. You want to be kings? You want to be royals? Your nation is not of royalty at all. Did you know that? Your nation isn't even quite a noble race, or let alone a noble nation. When you consider all the atrocities that I've had to endure, even during the establishment of my meek kingdom on a social media platform, that's great, with humility, and the humble pie at the same time. I know. But look at the attitude. Well, I think after 60 years in which the KKK and the MFB, these criminal organizations, were established, cultivated, and were given birth in this country, and the government of New Zealand breathed life into these so-called, 70-plus criminal organizations. After 60 years, that's correct. Man, you'd be the most arrogant son of a bitches ever on the face of the earth. You'd be no different from the Taliban and all those other terrorists around the country, or let's just say on this planet. You'd be the worst kinds. That's correct. I've discovered here at this address. So I, being a German, Scottish king, with a little tiny bit of English somewhere there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. About 20%, 15% English. I would be surprised if it went to about 20% English. That's correct. Oh, Jesus Christ, that's quite a lot. Except, if they have to do the calculation, they wouldn't know the difference. In their little minds, in their little shallow little tail minds, that's great. Bag of cement minds, they only recognize, coconut. Yeah, but what kind of coconut? Because there are plenty of coconuts out there. There are meek ones, there are arrogant ones, there are racist ones, and there are even ones that are quite prejudiced, and there are ones that are full of jealousy. Like Mr. and Mrs. Yoke there in Timarua. Yeah, but they are the worst kinds. Those kinds of so-called, fia palangis, fia Pākehās, wannabe Pākehās, fake Pākehās, over in Timarua, they are the most racist, arrogant son of a bitches, white niggers they're not in white niggers at all. That's correct. In fact, if they're white, they would breathe, they would live and exist and even cultivate their lives to revolve around the Pākehās, so that the Pākehās are treated better than the rest of their so-called indigenous race. Get it? Those two in Timarua would have to be KKK associates, meaning, for the existence. If Mrs. Yoke doesn't wear any knickers, who's she satisfying by doing that? Well, it could only be the KKK, because she would make them feel superior and lower her status. That's correct. But she's a brownie. She's a blackie. That's correct. She's a darkie. And if a darkie does that for a white person and makes a white person, their ego, almost like the heart is about to explode through the chest. That's correct. Like Puff the Dragon. Oh, God. That's right. Man, that kind of ego would annihilate a monarch, let alone behead some commoners right now. That's correct. That kind of ego. That is just, to me, evil. Why? Because the throne of God doesn't have that kind of, deviousness, but, disgustingness. That's correct. Where they've got to lower themselves to please and satisfy the white nigger. That's correct. They're alone to persuade somebody, to try and lower their status down, to make the Maoris in this country look superior, but also happier. But I do not tolerate that kind of nonsense. That's correct. So I, Dr. Snow Brown, am commanding. I am part German. I would say I'm probably about 60 or 70. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm 50% German. That's great. I wouldn't be surprised. And the Scottish, oh dear. Put together all your Pākehā side, you would dominate your indigenous side. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. That's correct. So before I make the commandment, of course, so the 10 most powerful NATO military type nations out there who are actually the most powerful, got the most powerful military that are part of NATO, before I make a plea with you, let alone command you, that's great. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this too. Chancellor, your right honorable Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and the rest of the citizens, the German citizens, it's great, in Deutschland, right around the globe, on this planet. My German great-grandfather, that's great, my dad's so-called grandfather, Heinrich August Stravatus, that's great, like most Germans, came to Samoa with a reason. They came to Samoa for a reason and with a purpose in mind as well. To find happiness. Find happiness. To find their match, or the one that's going to complete them. But also to find a brighter future, opportunities of wealth, to find, I don't know, I guess they came to find if there was any treasures there in that country, in that so-called small, that's right. Like the English, they colonized so many nations back in their days, that's correct. And even now, they're now in the business of colonizing people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Say that again. They're now in the business of colonizing people like traffic. Human trafficking. That's great. Right. So that is now the new business that is booming at the moment and is going out the doors, or even let's just say out of the bedrooms and the whorehouses, like hotcakes or like kumaras, let's say like pawas at the moment, mixed with kina and mixed with the English so-called mustard at the same time. Get it? That is now the business. So you two were the ones who sold heads, traded heads, severed heads of the Maori chiefs back in their time before the signing of the treaty in 1840. That's correct. And now they're in the business of, doing the same, but in terms of colonizing humans. That's correct. In terms of colonizing the Maoris. The Maoris must be the most stupidest race I have ever come across. That's correct. And the most dodgy and the most despicable one as well. Yeah. For applying shortcuts, but illegal, criminal harmful protocols and arbitrary dictatorships. They seem to hijack and take advantage of other people, other indigenous races, and other, mostly foreigners as well. Foreigners that were born overseas, but grew up here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That makes you guys really despicable, I know. But also low lives at the same time. But they are the bunch of, oh my God. When I think about it, it's not pretty, or ain't pretty at all. Right, Chancellor? You're right, Honorable Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Automatically, when my German great-grandfather, that's great, married my half-caste Samoan great-grandma, Koki Gibbons, that's great. In Samoa, and of course she died during the childbirth, that's great. and left a son who happened to be my dad's daddy, Gialino Herman Treviranus. And Treviranus is the correct pronunciation. So his daddy was a full German, but with Scottish blood as well, ancestry. His mother, I don't know, might have been Scottish, half Samoan, half Scottish, or half Samoan English. Because it is the case. And I think my daddy's mummy, well, his daddy was definitely a full Pākehā. Full English, but who knows, he might have had Scottish as well. And his mummy was part Scottish, part Samoan. That's correct. But there's the catch. There seems to be a lot of Scottish there. Oh, indeed. Now I'm here to find out whether my mother might have some Pākehā. She could very well have some Pākehā. But I actually think that my mother might have African heritage. That's correct. And other special heritage, which might be Spanish or Portuguese. Never know. That's correct. Or part English. That's correct. Or part Scottish. Never know. But I know that deep down in me, I'm German, Scotch, I'm a Pākehā. I'm a noble and I'm a Pākehā. That's correct. That is meek. Despite that, all the ratbags in this country, the low-life scumbags, that's great. And even the so-called Jello Marshmallow have been taking advantage of your indigenous, your noble indigenous, that's great. Your Samoan nobility. They certainly have, and even the elites have taken full advantage, especially the Maoris. And the half-caste Maoris seem to like studying you and listening in like they think they're so privileged, you know what I mean? And they're just bloody commoners. So yes, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, I think what I want to bring to your attention is that, like my German great-grandfather, Heinrich August Treviranus, many Germans immigrated to Samoa. Around about the early 1900s, even prior to that. And it was because, well, I think copra was high demand and plantations during that time, which is quite common with Pākehās at the time. If when slave trade was at the high, what was in fashion. So Germans, like the American Pākehās and the rest of the Pākehās, who might be Dutch or Swiss or some other, or South African, that's great. They all bought plantations. Or they went to the islands to buy some sort of lucrative, that's great, business. I guess what I'm saying to you, or what I'm trying to, bring to your attention, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the Germans, you chose to come to Samoa. You chose to immigrate to Western Samoa at the time. That's correct. Now, you what? And then you decided to give us a part of your heritage, a part of your German heritage, that's correct, German bloodline into our veins and into our bodies, that's correct. You didn't infect so cool. Because, well, Corky Gibbons was never a slave. I know that. That's correct. That is absolutely true. She was not a slave. So I wasn't born into slavery. Like most African Americans about during that time, that's correct, when slavery, was long outlawed, but it looks like the white niggas over in America, over in so-called America, were still practicing. They were still applying. They were still practicing slavery, but more like the bootleggers. Underground, that's correct. Just like what they're doing here in this country, over 70 criminal organizations that are also practicing and applying slavery. Underground. That's correct. Colonizing human now. It's what you call colonizing human trafficking. That's correct. Exploiting people here in this country. But I mean, the English doesn't mind as long as they get something, as long as their addiction is met and they're satisfied, which is called sex addiction. That's correct. As long as they have the upper hand to make decisions for the dumb Maoris, that's great. For the slaves, for the sex slaves, and whatnot, that's great. As long as they do what the Pākehā tell them to do. I don't know what you call that. I call that bondage. I call that bullshit as well. Trashy treaty partnership. That's great. That is founded on anarchy, corruption, cunningness, despicableness, spitefulness, jealousy. It is founded on what? It's not founded on solid ground. It is built on lies. Your devious treaty partnership is built on lies, not the truth, and built on misconceptions, and built and fed on lies. That's correct. Even the last 60 odd years. See how your prime minister, that's correct, made a fancy display. I actually think she made a fool of herself when they accepted, the so-called apology with the Samoan ritual. Yeah, the ifonga. That I totally disagreed with it. I didn't accept it. Why? Because, if I have to assess and weigh up, the severity of the harms, but what they did, that's great. It could never compensate. You can never compensate somebody, a crime after crime with an apology, let alone a ritual like that. It's not going to make it all go away. That's correct. Well, just look at my case where you guys mislead everybody. You put on a nice show for us to be convinced that you are remorseful, that you are repentant, that you have repented of your secret crimes, of your crimes against humanity, and in this case, against nobles like myself, against my people, and other Germans as well, and yet you go right ahead and do it all over again, but in another form. That's correct. You lying scumbags. You weasels. That's correct. You pirates. You whoring bunch. You cunning, despicable dirtbags who like to, sneak into people's homes, take advantage of them, listen and spy on them. That's correct. So I guess what I'm saying, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, I'm not a stranger that should be ignored by the Chancellor of Germany. I am not a stranger that the citizens of Germany should ignore and say that I'm not, and declare, my German, they couldn't accept my German heritage. When my German great-grandfather, so-called German blood, white pure blood, that's correct, his blessing, that's correct. And even my great-grandma, German, great-grandma, Margaret Maria Williamina Stewart, that's correct, runs in my vein. And you dare want to say that I'm what? I'm a full Samoan? Don't you dare! Don't you dare stick that to me! We part Samoans for part Germans! We got German running in our veins! We got German in our minds, in our spirits! You came to Western Samoa! You came to that country! And you gave us a piece and a part of your heritage. And you dare want to say that we're not Germans? That we couldn't be German citizens? But we have a German last name. Schwoger, Schmidt. So many, Roach, that's great. So many German last names. How dare you undermine? How dare you deny my nobility? My ancestors, my noble ancestors, heritage, their rights and their privileges. How dare they're your dad's brothers and sisters could deny your background, your white, your German heritage, and Scottish heritage. How dare they give that right rubbish to us? We have people that wear crowns. When I think about my dad, it's a bucket hat. But they gave him an indigenous treatment, like those low-life scumbags, criminals treatment. Belittled my dad. And even my mother. How dare you, English? How dare? Those Marys are rubbish that you care more about. You recognize their status as being Bakia. You recognize the English? Do you see it? But you see the English through the asshole. You see the English as whores. You see the English as their slaves. That's correct. They're good enough for you, isn't it? Their English is recognized. That's correct. And whatever they do is recognized and protected. But when it came to our nobility and our Pakianess, we were given rubbish. How dare they use the police to try and convert you into something that you're not? To lower your status. How dare, Prime Minister? The sender turn. I hope you burn in hell. The same for every minister. And I think about the court appearances. I say to myself, this is 2022, and it feels like we are right there in America during the slavery time. The time when the African Americans were suffering. And they had no one to protect them. And they had no one to rescue them. And I feel the same, and I feel the same way. But to have the entire nation of Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Maoris as well as the Pākehās, and even your government, and even the ratbags, to all gang up like that, to conspire with you, with against you, to deny you your privileges, as a Pākehā, as a German noble, and even as a Pākehā, I'm sorry, but that's the end of it. Come the 30th of January, you're going to see something. I promise you, you will see it. I don't even give a damn if I cry like this. Because it was so painful, but it was so painful. When I think about all those decisions, and I swear to God, I was never born in a slavery organization. To imagine to think that we came in this country so that we could become slaves to some treaty lowlifes, to some punks. And they couldn't even arrest them. Because they said what? Because you had fallen in love. Yes, right, your kingdom is the asshole. Because that's why. And serves you right, English. Serves you right. So what would happen now? If I command 10 NATO nations, that's correct, to deploy 1,000 armed forces to come to your country to take you out, to take out, all out, for committing treasons against my baby monarch, my royal family. That's correct. And for stealing our treasures and denying our crownship and our monarch and everything else that was a blessing. They destroyed everything. And I'm still standing holding it together. And now what they did. How evil these people are, honey bun. They even killed you. And it was because of that trading partnership and selfishness. Now you're going to get it. The fact that if people didn't apply their criminal harmful protocols or respect their protocols or respect that treaty, they murdered people senselessly in the last 60-odd years. You had 60 years, that's correct. It only took me 40 years to get full independence. As for the rest of you, you had 60 years, that's correct. To do nothing but study and spy and enjoy and have sex with the Pākehā. Yeah, and you got better at it. And you knew, oh, they know how to satisfy the English, all right? They sure do. Thank God I never had any children here. My children are a blessing. My 6 Holy Ghost children. It's right, Chancellor Olaf Scholz and all the Germans over in Germany. I don't ever need any of your money. And I don't need anything from you. But you owe me big time. That's correct. You owe my German great-grandfather. That's correct. Because of his last name and also because of the special monarch and the special kingdom that the English in this country have not only tried to overthrow. That's correct. And they know very well what the so-called protocols are for people, for commoners who do that. It's a death penalty. It's a death penalty all the way. So what am I saying now? That 10,000 military-type men will come. For the first time, only this time, they will take out the 2 organizations, but the other 70 plus will be quarantined. And and it's about time that they quarantine them. My God, can you imagine that they actually run the freaking country? And even run the government? So what will be next? Oh, this is not going to go really well. This is not going to go well because I will be fighting there at the courts. That's great. My restraining order. But any minister who gets in my way will be put down by the military. 1,000 Nazi soldiers. To think that they actually attempted, they actually set up with some, I don't know, disgusting punks like that. That's correct. The animals! How dare! Use you and your family, that's correct. What they could get out, just like with the government. But the government is a low-life scumbag and a bunch of punks. Who should also be put to death, that's correct. In fact, I think they'd be better off dead than alive. Because all they do is breed bullshit, rubbish, to a bunch of criminals, that's correct. So what? There's 10 powerful nations here before me. Number 1 is Greece. There's 130,000 active military members at the moment. In Poland, number 9, there is 120,000 active armed forces. Canada alone, there's about 70,000 active. Spain, there is 120,000 active. Germany, there's 184,000 active. Turkey, there's 425,000 active. The very country that Brendan Tarrant went to have a look, to check out what the Muslims were like and what they were doing there. And the only reason why that country has got so many active, despite it's not a huge country, 425,000, is because they are constantly targeted by terrorists. Probably every year and every month. That's correct. Now, Italy, it's got 170,000 active armed forces members. United Kingdom has got 194,000 active armed forces members. France has got 205,000 active armed forces members. The USA alone, this is probably the one that takes up the whole planet and the biggest, 1,390,000 active members of the armed forces. And of course, the total in the USA, 1,832,000 total members of the armed forces. Now, if you do the maths, that's correct. I only need 1,000 from these 10 powerful nations: Greece, Poland, Canada, Spain, Germany, Turkey, Italy, United Kingdom, France, and USA, who are probably all part of NATO. So I'm now going to do a plea bargain to all the governments in those nations that there's no doubt probably if I had a DNA analysis, it would probably show up that I probably have got some part Greece, Greek, Polish. I'd probably cover all those nations. So I'm asking 1,000 armed forces to be deployed from your nation, the most powerful, to eradicate, but to control, but more so to eradicate the guilty party that committed treasons against my private meek monarch in my kingdom. I'm a sovereign king. I'm speaking to you all as a meek sovereign king of Crystal Kingdom Church TV Limited, and also as a German noble. I am speaking to you all. Every German knows what it means to be German in their DNA, in their mindset, in their spirit, and in their heart. That's correct. I will never go back to Samoa because I don't have any other. I love my people, but they don't love me that much. That's correct. And I don't love them that much either. That's correct. I love more my Pākehā side. My German and my Scottish side, I love more than the English side. I have never ever had anything. I honestly don't know why, the guardian angel would never accept anybody from this country, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's probably because they are not royals and they are not meek like you. And also because, they're not a steward. That is correct. But more so because they've committed so many heinous treasons against your household, your royal household and royal monarch. And the guardian angel is saying that I, as a meek sovereign king, I have a right to protect my meek royal household. Any members of us that are still living here, but any members of my royal family that are still living and breathing on this planet, that's correct. Every royal household out there would know what it means to be a full royal and what it means to wear a crown and to have that kind of authority. So you need the armed forces to be deployed, that's correct, So I'm pleading also now with the Right Honourable Jens Stoltenberg, the Norwegian politician or the Secretary General of Nato. Hang on a second. I'm back again. So I, Dr. Snow Brown, hereby humbly beseech you or request your Right Honourable Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, to please have a meeting with the 10 nations that I've just mentioned, 10 most powerful nations with their armed forces, in terms of Greece, Poland, Canada, Spain, Germany, Turkey, Italy, United Kingdom, France, and USA, to see if they could deploy 1,000 armed forces, because we have over 70 criminal organizations of the worst kind that are actually terrorists in this country, that the government of New Zealand has aided and abetted, has allowed it, especially the Monkey Mob Association of the Upper Hutt, whose members have taken up most of the tenancy inside this current address, and also the KKK that has been also part of their associates, that has made my life unbearable, but abominable, but a real threat, and a danger. Has endangered my life. My life has been attempted 3 times, even more than that. I'm talking about attempted murder in terms of, well, the nosebleed that they gave me 3 times. So that falls under the Crime Act, 1961, of attempted murder. That's correct. The drugging and poisoning, well, it falls under that act as well. But now we've got 5 legislation that's been violated. So they're committing treasons of the most heinous, of the most unbearable. They are deliberately breaching their obligations, the government of New Zealand, the international obligation to protect nobles like myself or royal families, because we are actually above the majority of Pākehās and Maoris in this country, irrespective of my so-called beneficiary status or job seeker and unemployment status as a job seeker. That's correct. I am actually now a full royal, and I wear a crown that's invisible, and I'm a Knights Templar. So at this age now, if anybody commits treasons against my baby monarch or my royal household, I am likely to kill people. That's correct. That's what it means to be a Knights Templar. Every German who's a Knights Templar would understand where I'm coming from. That when you're a Knights Templar, and when you make an assessment, when your brain is in agreement with the spirit creature, the guardian angel, and the archangel, and even the Holy Spirit of God, and our Queen who sits above me, then you know the death penalty has to be carried out. That's correct. There's no compromising. It's their time to go. But of course, if your government deliberately pervert the courses of justice by refusing to do anything, acting, behaving sort of negligent and negligence and in ignorance, and deliberately ignores that a crime has been committed, or that somebody is being tortured and being harmed as in pain. Now, of course, I don't know what you would call that kind of behavior. That's correct. But as far as I'm concerned, I've got a right now to kill people who deliberately subject me to tortures and cruelties and who deliberately commit treasons against my meek brown monarch. King Charles III would agree with me. King Harold V would know. The royals, the crowned so-called royals of Dubai would agree with me that they wouldn't waste time with these sort of criminals. That's great. They would just put them out with a firing squad. But at the moment, New Zealand, I don't know, they're probably waiting for a miracle somehow, for somebody to drop from the sky. That's correct. I don't know, maybe they're hoping that I'm going to have, I don't know, develop some sort of wings because I've got a guardian angel and an archangel, that a miracle that I'm going to turn into an angel somehow. I don't know what experiments is going on here, but it's becoming really toxic. Like I said, there are so many active armed forces. There is a lot. And I only need 10,000 of you. But you see, 1,000 Nazi soldiers would be enough. But when you've got over 70 criminal organizations, remember, once 2 criminal organizations that are actually terrorist groups that have been around for over 60 years, commit deliberate treason, that's great, against a brand new monarch that was born here in your country, right, then that means we are now also under threat with all the other 70 plus organizations that make up the 70 plus. That's great. We are now, our royal family, in fact, is no longer safe to live here in your country. We have to leave your country. We'd have to file asylum to go overseas to America. That's great. It is no longer safe for my royal household to live here in your country, and especially here at this local township. Because everywhere I look, is treasons. There is death, there is death. There is hatred, that's great. There is no support. That's why I'm quite happy to deal with the Germans, because they know how to look after people like myself. Because I am part German, and I'm a noble German, that's great. So they would understand what it means to be a German. The English will never understand what it means to be a German, and probably on your level, they would understand what it means to be a Bakia, but not a German. That's correct. But under the circumstances, if they're having sex with the Maoris all the time, well, you know, people are just going to be dealt to, especially your kind and your household. You see how even when you serve the trespass notice and you've given them so many verbal warnings, this organization still finds a loophole somewhere through somebody in this local township, and only because they're racist and they do accept their protocols. That's correct. I don't know why. Why would you do that? If you know that slavery was outlawed during the signing of the treaty at 1840, when the Maoris no longer were slaves, that's great, because they were slaves formerly to their head chiefs of their tribes and hapus, that's correct. But once they signed the treaty, well, they now had the protection of the crown. But they were now had the privilege of being so-called citizens of Britain. So which means the Britain now had an obligation to protect them. But under the circumstances, the government of New Zealand is now doing something that is wrong. That's great. That violates all the natural laws of, common sense and also, rationality, common sense, but also sanity. That's correct. Where they are actually allowing the criminals, instead of arresting them, processing them in the system, and also either putting them down, as in killing them via the so-called, firing squad, because that's what you would do as a prime minister and even as a minister of the crown. If another person was being threatened by people like that, because that's the outcome that they deserve. That's correct. It's a death penalty. Except if you turn around and allow them to carry on with their harms, that's correct. Where they're deliberately now, violating and committing heinous so-called treasons, then I'm afraid I've got a right to stand up for myself, and I've got a right to retaliate and declare war. This is correct. And that is now going to take place on the 30th of January. But before that, there will be about, let's hope not 10 restraining orders that I will need to file at the courts. Because it looks like it might, be that many. That's correct. Right, let's hope not. Yes, and the other thing I want to bring to so-called Chancellor Olaf Scholz attention. Yeah. You're a German. That's correct. You're right, Honorable. You're a German. You're a full German. I'm not sure. Maybe you might have. You're a German. That's correct. You're a typical German. But you're not English. And you're not Scottish. That's correct. And the majority of the government of Germany, Bundestag, is made of German. Staunch, hardcore German. That's great. And they know who they are, what it means to be German. So I hope you understand how I feel when I say I definitely feel like a German. In fact, I would have been better if I stayed put right there in Germany when I came the second time, when I was given the opportunity to go to university there and stay there in Germany. That's correct. Fortunately, I think homesickness and my parents had other options. And look where it led me to. That's correct. First time ever that a meek noble like myself had to ask the Secretary General of Nato, that's correct, for a military help, for military assistance. And the same for the German, Chancellor, the government of Germany, in terms of the Chancellor of Olaf Scholz. First time ever that myself, who was a meek German noble, had to ask for assistance from both governments, that's right, or from both nations, the Norwegian, Norway, and the government of Germany. Why? Well, let me remind you why it's so significant. America, about the time when the government of so-called America decided to declare and to put a stop, to have invoke a prohibition, and also to stop slavery now, to get rid of slavery and outlaw slavery in America, around about 1807. And around about the same time, later on, the KKK, was established, and the community became quite powerful, an extremist white group. There would have been a lot of resistance. There would have been a lot of outrage and resistance from a lot of, white niggers, the most racist, arrogant son of bitches, white niggers in the southern part of America that didn't want that outcome to happen. Didn't want their government, the government of America, to suddenly all of a sudden turn around and end slavery. They've had slavery for 400 years. So it means they were now going to lose, their so-called loyal slaves and even hard workers that have been slaving for the last 400 years, and they've been doing all sorts of things to make the Pākehā look good in the eyes of society, and also to make the Pākehā feel like he is so privilegious, so prestigious and so superior than the rest of the kingdom come, than the rest of the planet. That's correct. But it's just an illusion, and it's a misconception. That's correct. Because the gods know better. And the government that passed that law to outlaw slavery in America, thanks to, President Lincoln and other American, because, well, they were now married to a lot of African Americans. That's correct. And they were now having children that were half caste. So I can see that, the point that, that the African Americans had outperformed themselves in every part of their lives, and even had fulfilled their obligations, had met their obligations in every aspect. And remember, they never asked the white niggers, to steal us from Africa and bring us over to the land of the free to be sold as slaves and as chattel, or to be used as a commodity. That's correct. They never asked for that. The brown man and the black man never asked, that's correct, the white man to come along and hijack them from their homelands or steal them and take them over. That's correct. To meet your own selfish needs. That's correct. We never asked for that. So I never asked for what's going on now here in Aotearoa, New Zealand to happen this way. My family didn't come here for that reason. That's correct. To be part of any criminal organization, or even to be targeted by a criminal organization such as this one that was established in 1962. So what did the government of America had to do? Well, once that law was passed to outlaw slavery, they discovered that now the most arrogant racist white niggers were now targeting black African Americans to kill. That's correct. Why? Well, it was probably because of the hatred and the jealousy, but also it was to vent out their frustration that they were getting what they wanted. They were getting their freedom. That's correct. And they were now left with what? Empty-handed? Or left, lost? I don't know. But I guess the lesson that the Yankees soon had to learn, the racist white nigger and even the KKK soon had to learn at that time, was that the government of America was dead serious about eradicating slavery. That's correct, and getting rid of it and putting a stop to it. So how did they police and make sure that the law was enforced? Because a lot of Americans who are racist, like the local who are racist in this country, in this township, wouldn't stop applying the arbitrary dictatorships and criminal harmful protocols from so-called criminal organizations like this red one and the white one, only because they're racist. And even when they know it's against the law, they still go ahead and apply it. Now, that's exactly what happened over in America. When the government of America had outlawed, slavery, the white niggers, the American white niggers, didn't stop, still applying their slavery type protocols. That's correct. So what did the government of America had to do? Well, it deployed armed forces. That's correct. It sent out the troops. And I mean in the thousands. That's correct. To police the countryside and every other area to ensure that the law was upheld, that there was no slavery, that there was no America still practicing slavery. That has to stop. So it took a long time. That's great. Probably by the 1900s, that some slaves were still in bondage and were still being targeted by the racist white Americans. That's great. So can you see now what would happen in this situation? These organizations, especially that one, the red one, has been committing crimes in secret, applying criminal harmful protocols, arbitrary dictatorship for the last 60-odd years. The newcomers, of course, probably in the last 40-odd years that I lived in New Zealand, that's when a lot of these organizations started to apply. That's correct. But from about 1970s, 80s, 90s, they would have applied a lot of these criminal organizations. So if what I don't understand is if there's a law that says that slavery was outlawed during the signing of the treaty in 1840, then why have we got over 70 criminal organizations that actually contravenes the law against slavery? It contravenes the law against human trafficking. Under the Crimes Act, that's section 98D of the Crimes Act 1961, it actually does. What they're doing is against the law. Well, I mean, when they violate the Crimes Act 1961, the Harassment Act 1997, the Residential, Tenancy Act 1986, the Trespass Act 1980, The Bill of Rights Act 1990, well, that's about there's already 5 legislations. Can you see now why your government deserved the death penalty, like the rest of you that committed treasons? And we're applying these criminal harmful protocols only because your government was aiding and abetting you, and the racist son of a bitches in your local community were encouraging you to do so? So what would happen now if I turn around and gun you all down? That's correct. Take you all out. And that would be my right. Because you didn't stop. That's correct. You should have stopped when I served your trespass notice. So what exactly are you after? That's correct. You're not going to get my royal ass. That's correct. If your kingdom is an asshole and my kingdom is up here, on my head, in my heavenly kingdom, that's correct. And I'm a headship and you're a tail, what you suppose is going to happen? That's right. I'm going to go right over you. That's correct. And you're just going to go right past me. That's correct. But if you think that I'm going to bow down to you and you're a tail and you don't have a head and you don't wear a crown, buddy, I'm going to kill you because you're a tail. You couldn't kill me because now you're overstepping. And that is why the nobles back in their days had to cut the heads off, sever the heads off of the commoners because a lot of them were tails. They didn't wear crowns. And they are not privileged to ascend to any thrones, let alone wear crowns, let alone have the authority to dispense justice, but to dispense authority from a kingship on the level of a crownship. That's correct. You might be the most intelligent son of a bitch, the most intelligent Pākehā. You might speak fancy words, that's correct. You might be well-spoken, like the majority of lawyers, Pākehās in the court system, and even judges, and even, academics. But if you are not of noble blood, and you're not full royal, then I'm afraid their intelligence and their opinions don't matter to somebody like me. That's correct. Because I will supersede you, I will overthrow you, and I will conquer you. That's correct. Yeah, you'd be amazed. That's why I've got the guardian angel. He will tell me how to overrule you. So I don't need to speak well-spoken English. Yeah, I don't need to speak the way that a lot of you speak. That's great. How you speak when you're around the so-called elites. I don't need to be around the elites. I am an elite. That's correct. All by myself. And you'll see when I go to another country, you'll be very sorry. That's correct. That you did what you did, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And only because of your jealousy and the rest of it. But like I said, I never really belonged here in this country. And I can't wait to leave this dumpster, dead lands, more like it. But at least they now know. What happens to a government that breaks its laws deliberately? They generally get overthrown, and what? That's correct. They will be overruled by the armed forces, by the Nato. That's correct. By the nobles and the royals. I am from the noble classes. That's great. A lot of you are just commoners who rose to the occasion. I don't know. Who probably entered somebody's asshole. We get to the top. That's correct. But if you think that you're a king, no. The originals will always overrule the counterfeits, the copycats. That's correct. The duplicates. Remember that. Well, I hope I've enlightened them that I'm on my way. But now you've got blood on your hands, blood on your backsides, blood on your hands. Aotearoa, New Zealand, you are going down. They are going down. And even Dr. George Matthew would have to come to court to explain himself on the restraining order. That's correct. Where is your authority, mister? Are you a KAK or an MB associate? Make up your mind. Which one? That's correct. Because if you did that on behalf of that organization, well, even you can go to jailbreak. That's correct. Or you can get a non-association order. So for every person, every associate that committed a crime against my person, that contributed, that's right, to that organization's so-called, arbitrary dictatorships, you are all getting a non-association order. A non-association order, that's correct, on your orders. And now I'm going to be dictating on the level of a king, that's correct. Let's see what you're going to do. Because I tell you right now, you can't run to another country. Because, well, I can have you extradited back here in this country for a court case for your restraining orders. Welcome to my world, that's correct. So you all take care, because I've got 2 bodyguards over me. And another bodyguard that I dare say is a German Shepherd. Welcome. So as I said, you got until the 30th of January to get your black asses, white asses, Indian asses down at the station and make a statement. Because on that day, it's all downhill. It's all D-Day. That's correct. You got it. You asked for it. You got to get it. Right. You asked for it for a war. That's correct. You got it. But now I'm going to cover all 70 plus organizations with the armed forces that are coming. That's correct. Whichever armed forces that's coming on behalf of Dr. Snow Brown, if I am now globally well known, that's correct, they will now have to deal with over 70 of them. Amen, amen. Because if we don't get those other ones under control and get rid of these other 2, yeah, things are just going to get worse and worse and worse for the Christians here, but especially for the nobles, that's correct, that are meek. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Well, thank you very much for lending your attentions and ears, and thank you for taking the time also to be nosy, and to listen if you're going to take me seriously, or if not, enjoy your Christmas. Stay safe and have a very happy New Year. And I'll keep you all posted as usual. Right? Goodbye.